Hello. Welcome back to the Mammoth Moms podcast. Welcoming Holly Moscatiello today on this beautiful, it's almost spring. Spring
Yes.
is 2 days from now.
Yes, very close. We're close.
We're close. It was freezing this morning though. I've had quite the morning actually. I just want to say that you know how you start out the week and you're like, all right, we got this.
Yes.
We are going to crush this week. And then I woke up this morning, there was no power.
Because it was so windy yesterday?
I don't know. I have no idea. We don't normally lose power a lot, but lately we have been. No power. My daughter forgot her lunch. We don't live close to her school. It was it's 11 o'clock right now, but I feel like I've had 7 mornings so far.
Yes.
But so happy to have you on the podcast
So
today.
happy to be here.
We connected probably about a month now.
Yeah.
And I've been watching a little bit what you're doing. You run the Balance Project, and I'll let you explain exactly what that is.
Yeah.
But very excited to have you share what you're doing, which is an incredible need for the community, for the country, probably for the world.
Just a small problem.
And tell me, where are you originally from?
Sure. So I am originally from Northeast Pennsylvania, north of Scranton, if anyone knows.
The Office?
The Office, yes, exactly. So I actually grew up on essentially a farm. My grandmother grew up on a farm, and she had 5 brothers and sisters, and they each got a plot of land.
Okay.
And it was essentially 4 acres of farm surrounded by a field, another farm, and a farm across the street. So I grew up in a very, I would say, unplugged childhood.
Okay.
Grew up playing outside, having a lot of fun with nature, and then moved to Philadelphia for college. Started to get that city life, moved to New York, and then ended up here.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to St. Joe's in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. I had friends that went there.
Yes.
That's so interesting. I mean, I think so. I grew up in Hazlitt, which is not in the middle of nowhere, but at the time it was much more. I wouldn't say a rural feel, but when I moved here, where Marshall's is in Homedale, that shopping center didn't exist.
Yes.
And across the way also didn't exist, and it was, I think it was Ming, did you grow up around here or no?
No.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. I was trying to remember if what that, it was I forget if it was a warehouse, but it was much more open land, farms and stuff like that. And then when we were little, we grew up in on a cul-de-sac, and there's a creek behind my mom's house. She still lives in the same house. And I used to literally play in the creek.
So did I. I would have Barbie honeymoons in the creek. I could distinctly remember bringing them down and having them sit on rocks and pretend that they were in an exotic place.
I've told my daughter this, and she's looks at me I have 5 heads because she just does not have that life.
Yes.
And we, I try to get her outside as much as I can, and we'll get to all of this and everything. But it's just it's a different world.
Yeah, my grandparents had they had a satellite dish, so there was 4 channels, and none of them were really kid channels. It was the news. So I would literally just go lay outside and stare at the clouds and play in the yard, and that was how I grew up, riding my bike up and down the driveway 50 million times.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah,
Yes.
That was it. I mean, we saw our friends a lot, and another thing. Let's put a pin on this because someone explained this to me recently, why. Kids don't gather the way that they, I was always with a friend.
Yeah.
And that was life. It was just kind of that social aspect and being outside. And so I love being outside still.
Yes, me too.
I'm not a camper type.
Same.
But I love going to the park.
But I'm
not
looking to camp again.
I'm a hiker, if there is a paved path.
I will go off the paved path on a hike, but I'm not that interested in sleeping in a tent.
Quick story, completely getting off topic now. My aunt lives in Albany and she loves to hike. So we went to stay with her. My son was he was 10 because it was right before I met my husband. And we went to go visit her, and there's all she lives by Lake George.
Oh,
so it's beautiful.
Lake George.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
favorite place.
We're and I love to run, so I'm sure, we'll go on a hike. So I did not anticipate this type of hike, and this was a 6-hour hike, which her daughter was very used to. My son was not. So we went on this hike, and mind you, it was steep. It was hours. I was okay, thank you for the warning about that. I thought we were going on like a half hour. I don't know. But you get to the top and it's gorgeous.
Yes.
Like it was so, and honestly, like in hindsight, you know, it's just like anything in life. Like you just keep climbing and you get to the top and it's kind of worth it.
Yeah.
So nice, but I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
It was a little bit too much for
Yeah,
me.
I get that. I understand. I totally understand.
So tell me, so you went to school in Philly, and
Yep.
how did you end up in Monmouth County?
So I met my husband, who grew up in Manasquan Wall, in college. So we actually met our first day of class in math class. We sat next to each other. I didn't have a pencil. I asked him for a pencil, and he had plenty, and that essentially sums up our relationship.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah, so we met in math class, and we started dating a couple of years later. He was from here, and when we both moved to New York after school, worked in the city, lived in the city, and we would just come, you know, in the summer. Of course, we came to the Jersey Shore. Who wants to be in the city in the summer? And when it was time to start looking for where to live, we lived in Cranford for a little while. We contemplated living up there, but we just still found ourselves coming to, you know, the beaches and the shore down here, and loved the additional space that we got. Especially, again, I was like very adamant about having a lot of space, and yard and trees and green.
Yeah.
And so we landed here, and we moved to Little Silver in 2015. We bought a 1950 Cape. We completely renovated ourselves by hand with my dad. It was an incredible experience. I don't know how we did it looking back. We didn't have kids, so that certainly helped, but we really put in a lot of work to that, and it was just such an incredible experience, and the community is so wonderful. And in the beginning of COVID, like that November, we actually sold that house and moved into the house that we're in now. And, you know, just love the community and the neighbors, and it's just such a wonderful place.
Oh, I love this area, Little Silver, and I know what you mean about Cranford. I love Cranford and Westfield, and like that 22 area. There's like no, you know, everything is on 22.
Yes,
but there's no beach.
Yes,
and that's kind of like, it's just like, why would you? I don't know. For me, it's like
it's
I'd
like
much rather
too
live
close
here.
and too far at the same time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So you have 3 kids.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're how old?
3 girls. So Molly is almost 7. Ruby just turned 5, and Reese is almost 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you work full time?
I work full time.
And what do you do?
So I work in advertising, healthcare advertising specifically. I've done that my entire career. And right now I'm in a role where I help manage the relationship with one of our large clients. So making sure that we are, you know, servicing them properly, and also helping them bring their brands to life. So we do a lot of branding and positioning and messaging and marketing and campaigns. And we just had a really exciting spot run on the Super Bowl for breast health. So if you haven't seen it, go look up Your Attention Please, because ladies, you need to take care of your your breast health.
Okay.
Yeah, so really exciting, meaningful work that actually has helped me tremendously with the Balance Project. So I can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, but that's what I do.
That's interesting. How did you get into it? Was it like an internship, or did you know you wanted to do advertising?
I interned. So I was a marketing major, and I knew I loved that space. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I mean, who does, right? And I did get an internship initially one summer in New York in PR, where it was reminiscent of Devil Wears Prada in terms of I was a publicity intern, and I would have to take like huge boxes of flyers to bars on like the Lower East Side. And I was, you know, 20 years old, schlepping this giant box of flyers around the city in the summer, like sweating to death. I think I lost like 10 pounds that summer. I just was like walking all summer. So I did that, and I was like, okay, that was cool, but I don't know if that's really what I want. And then actually Ryan's older sister worked in healthcare advertising, and she was like, well, you should get an internship. So I got an internship, and I just fell in love with we did an intern project in new business, and we had to do a mock new business pitch. And I loved it. It was like just so amazing to kind of learn about the market, the customer, the product, and kind of put together a recommendation and present it. And it was just like such an exciting experience. And so I fell in love with new business and started my career in the business development group there at Omnicom, CDM New York it was at the time. And spent a couple years in new business, have done a lot of stints in client service, and now my role is a bit of a hybrid of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I also find like marketing and obviously advertising now fascinating, but I didn't, start out in that.
Yeah.
But I'm always so curious to know like how, what led you to what you're doing. So,
Yes.
So tell me what brought your attention to even starting the Balance Project and what it is.
Yeah, of course. So for those who don't know, so the Balance Project, it's a parent-led initiative, organization really, and our goal is to bring balance to real life and technology. So we know from the statistics that we're spending more time as kids and as adults on screens than ever before and less time in the real world. So after learning more about that, on my quest to be, the best mom I could be, doing all the research, I'm a typical elder millennial mom, kind of following all the Instagram accounts, reading all the books, and just kind of learning more and more about this space and the impact that increased screen time and technology is having on our kids. I just felt it was really important to make that a priority. So really what the turning point was is I read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. If you haven't read it, you absolutely should.
Okay.
He is a social psychologist that essentially mapped trends in, anxiety, depression, suicide, globally, not just in the U.S., but globally, to the introduction of the smartphone and to the introduction of the like feature on Facebook and the like feature on Instagram, and essentially correlates, and in some cases there's causal relationships between all of that and the mental health epidemic in our youth right now. So once I read that book, I couldn't unsee it, and I felt really called and compelled to move into action. And so that's really what started the journey of the Balance Project.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that so do you know that, has it been proven that we've had a spike in suicide and depression, and has it been attributed to?
Yeah.
It has. Okay.
Yeah.
I still have to read that book.
Yeah.
I know we talked a
if
little
you
bit
look,
about
there's
it.
literally there's graphs that show that I think boys' increase in anxiety and depression went up 161% since 2010. Girls went up 140%, I think, and the suicide rate amongst youth went up 240%.
Yeah.
And it's all along that same curve. And essentially what the book says is it compares globally, because it's, they try to isolate the different variables, and there's essentially no other explanation. And I think the reason that they give for that is it's not only the time you're spending on the screen, but it's what you're not doing.
Yep.
And I think that's the part for me that hurts the most, because I just believe so much in living every day to its fullest and kind of getting the most out of life and giving my kids those building blocks to be the best, versions of themselves that they can be. And what I realized is that phone-based childhood could actually take away all of that work that we as parents put in, and curate a life for them, and having that be at risk from an external force was just too scary, and something that I just wasn't able to kind of allow. And that's why I'm motivated and why I do it until midnight or on the weekends or after my kids go to bed, because it's just so important.
Yeah, it is. So when did you start it? It's
November.
Recent. Yeah, I thought so. Okay.
November.
And it has been kind of like a whirlwind since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me what who you're working with and what the Balance Project is helping for schools and obviously for kids.
Yeah. So truly, I read this book. I started talking to people about it and realized that everyone had a similar concern, or at least a general awareness that there was something that should be done, but people weren't sure what to do. And so I just started assembling a small group of parents that were interested enough in continuing the conversation that they were willing to like come over and have a conversation and say, okay, like what can we do? So we had a group of 6 families that kind of committed to helping to shape what this would be. And it's a wonderful group of people. We have a principal, we have a clinical psychologist, we have nurses, we have marketing, we have operations and financial people. And so we really ended up being a pretty well-rounded group to kind of attack this from all angles. And so what we did was I kind of laid out an approach that, again, I kind of leaned into my experience in marketing and thinking about, this is really about driving behavior change. And this is really about, getting people to do something that maybe they don't even know that they should do, or that they don't want to do, or that they're afraid to do. And so kind of applied, all of the tools that I've learned in my career to this problem and kind of mapped out what I thought good looked like in terms of driving change. So what we did was we kind of organized ourselves into a couple of groups. We've got our core team. We've got an educational kind of event-based team. We've got an in-school team, and we've got an out-of-school team. And I think the big thing for us is we grounded ourselves in the 4 norms that were laid out in The Anxious Generation, which, again, if you've read it, you know this. If not, the first, I don't know if I'm going to get the order right, but Jonathan Haidt suggests that in order to kind of combat what we're seeing in the mental health crisis, we should have phone-free schools. So there's a lot of movement around that. We should delay the introduction of a smartphone until at least high school. We should delay social media until 16. And then we should encourage more free play, independence, and responsibility for our kids. So there's a whole movement and a whole groundswell of momentum around those 4 norms. And so we kind of grounded ourselves in those and crafted kind of our education strategy and our event strategy, our in-school strategy, and our out-of-school strategy around those. So that's been really helpful to have those. So thank you, Jonathan, for putting that out into the universe. Yeah. It served, and the last chapter of his book is all about, okay, here's all the information. Now we need you guys to go forth and set the world on fire instead of. And so we're kind of taking that and considering ourselves, driving that collective action. So from an educational standpoint, we're hosting a multitude of different educational events, and with the goal of just getting people onto like a general level playing field of understanding, right? So I'm obviously deeply steeped in this. I'm doing all the research, I'm spending time, but none of us have time as parents, right? So we're trying to kind of curate an educational pathway to understanding. And so we have had panels where we've had different perspectives from, principals to students themselves to play specialists to, psychologists, kind of sharing the different perspectives of the issue. We've had, just general sessions where we get people up to speed on, the trends and what we're seeing and neuroplasticity and why adolescence is such a, precious time that we need to take care of very mindfully. And then most recently last week, we hosted a device showcase where we brought in an array of alternate devices to a smartphone. So if we're, suggesting to delay, what are we giving kids and when and what's available? Because there's actually a ton available that I never even knew about. Yeah. And different ways to keep kids safe and all of that. So we can definitely talk about that more. So that's kind of the educational stream, and it's been great. We've had great response, great attendance. We're also doing a book club, so anyone can join the book club if they'd like. where, again, we're just trying to share a well-balanced perspective, because I love technology. I work in advertising.
Same.
So I'm not anti-technology at all. It's just about the balance.
It is. So let's dive in a little bit to kind of what is happening in different age groups, I'd say. For the younger kids, it's really kind of a new culture where, it's easy to give the kids iPads and tablets and stuff like that in restaurants, right? And while, I'm guilty of it, my daughter has had an iPad for a long time, and she watches stuff on it, and it allowed me to work a little bit more. I'm very mindful where we would put it down, and I love bringing her to the park, and but I really have to push her to go outside versus a new culture where we live in, where our kids are not on their bikes willingly. We live on a block where it's a cut through block, so and it's uphill, so she's definitely not on her bike a lot, and also now we're when we were younger, we would just say we would go out and play and, come home when it was dinner time. That just doesn't, I think maybe it depends on your, where you live and your family and stuff like that. But that's not what we do in our family. And there's this whole now new, I guess, kind of mentality where you're nervous about what could happen to your kids because of the internet, right? So that's number one, right? And knowing where they are, putting air tags on your kids, backpacks and all of that. So there's that piece, right? Yeah. Then fast forward a little bit and you're getting into the, older elementary years, the tween years where some kids have phones, some don't. And depending on where the kids go to school and stuff like that, in the group of kids, it starts early on of just my, I see, we passed notes in school when we were growing up. Now, everything that it lapses into after school where you are, getting texts from friends or, even some in that age group are on social media, and you're kind of having to have these conversations with your kids about well, why can't I have Instagram? And it kind of opens up this whole can of worms. And in middle school, which is already a challenging time for kids, where you have kids who are now getting depressed because they're seeing either kids that are bullying them through digital devices or things that they see on social media, FOMO and just things that they don't have, and comparing themselves to others. And then another piece, which you and I talked about when we first met, is the distribution of all kinds of different things amongst, I'd say, middle schoolers, but mostly probably high schoolers, and the consequences and ramifications that can happen too. I don't want to say specifically boys, but I think a lot of the time it is boys, with, just passing around pictures of girls and whatever. And it does happen. I hear about it all the time. I heard it twice in the past 2 days on the podcast yesterday. And then someone else was here about kids being on buses and they're sharing nude they airdrop it to the whole bus, or they didn't mean to, and then this kid is passing child porn around, right? And then so I heard two different stories. It was two different townships in Monmouth County. It happened in the past week. One was handled one way, another was handled a different way. It really comes down to the police department. But what can happen is that these boys can be put on the sex offenders list because they're distributing child porn. And I think that's what parents don't understand and know. So that's really important. And I've been talking about this for a few years. I've wanted to, have someone from the police department or just someone in law enforcement to really come in and talk about what is happening and what to be aware of, and why it's important that kids not have phones, right, and not be on social media. And it's not just because you don't trust your kid or whatever, or but there's a lot of things that can happen, and you don't want to be blindsided. You obviously want to protect your kids. So what are some things that you are advising just from doing this for the last few months for kids from the little ones, and then what are some devices that we can give our kids in middle school, and what are they saying about all of it?
Oh my gosh! So obviously it's a very layered and complex issue, as you just articulated, and I think that's what makes this so important that we think about this as something that we're going to continue to be committed to and evolve, because what this is not is a make one change, easy button, set it and forget it solution. It's just not. And so I think one of the things we're really trying to do is be really thoughtful and mindful about all of those things. So what are we recommending and why and based on what? And, is it grounded in legitimate research and so on and so forth? So both in our in-school and our out-of-school committee, what we're currently doing right now is we're actually working from an in-school perspective with our administrators in partnership with them, which is really important, to take a look at their school policies and evaluate, okay, what's working, what could be enhanced, what's missing, what do we need to tweak? And so some of those things are device policies, right? And so how is, there's support now on a state level in New Jersey for phone bans in school.
Yeah.
So different schools have different policies already. And so how are we in each individual school working with our administration to make sure, A, we have the strongest policy that we can, B, that we're enforcing that policy consistently, and C, that we're helping parents get comfortable with that. Because I think one of the big things we hear from parents is, well, I need to make sure that my kid is safe, and, it's not convenient if I can't get in touch with them, and what if I need to tell them something? And we hear from the administrators that parents are actually the ones that are texting the kids in school. And so when the kids are getting distracted, it's actually their parents. And so I think that's why for us it's not a one-dimensional issue. It's a holistic issue, and it's something that we've got to work with our administrators on, we've got to educate the parents on, and we've got to educate the kids. Yeah. So I think that's, I'm not necessarily answering your question, but what I'm saying is it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And so I think every community and every school is a little bit different. In Little Silver, for example, our kids go into middle school in 5th grade, and that has become kind of the developmental kind of, rite of passage has been they get an iPhone, they get a smartphone. And so we're trying to change that, right? And so right now we had that device event last week, and we're working with the 4th grade parents as kind of a cutout to say, okay, 4th grade parents, now that we're educated on this and now that we know what alternate devices we have, what choices are we going to make for our kids going into 5th grade so that we kind of break the chain, we stop it from just continuing the train getting on the tracks. So we haven't had that decision yet, but we are having the conversation. And so over the next couple of months, we're going to be working with those parents and those kids. We had kids at the event last week, to see there's still cool looking phones, and there's still things you can do that kind of protect them from some of the harms that you mentioned in terms of sharing nude photos or accessing inappropriate information. There are tons of companies that have created devices, whether it be watches, whether it be tracking devices, or full-blown cell phones. We also had flip phones there last week, that can be a solution for those, kids just getting their first phone. I think right now, as you mentioned, for the high school kids, most of them already have phones. So for me, the solution there is how do we educate them, to your point, on safety. And in a lot of schools they're doing this, in a lot of schools they're not. So I think getting everybody to another equal playing field from that perspective is really an important solution. But then also, giving them other ways, and parents other ways to support and layer on from a safety perspective. So there's home routing systems that provide a layer of parental protection and control. There's apps that help kids with screen time, because I think that's really, when I think about those older kids, it's keeping them safe, and it's keeping them, or educating them and making them aware of screen time and kind of starting to break that addiction a bit, right? Because we know these kids are spending 7 hours outside of school on average on a screen.
No.
Yes. And it's actually more like 8. 7 is the national average. For the younger kids, it's closer to 8. So it's like a full working day.
Wow.
Plus the school day, right? So they're on screens in school. They've got activities. So when you break it down, they have about 30 minutes of like unstructured time every day. So they're not bored. They're not creating. They're not experimenting. They're not doing any of that, because they're just able to kind of roll with the device. So last week we shared, like, here's an an app that helps you manage your screen time.
Yeah.
Here's a physical box with an app that helps you put the phone away so that you can spend time. And so these are things that we are trying to normalize, and kind of normalize, that you don't always have to be on the phone in your home with your friends and your community, and just trying to shift that norm. And it is not a small task. No. And when I actually say this out loud, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I crazy?
Yeah.
but it's already starting to work, and I see it in my own home. And I asked my husband if I could tell this story, but he was more on the phone, and he has more of an addictive personality than I do. So I was able to kind of put it away and focus on the kids, and like, who cares if I have all these unread text messages, and my friends know I am horrible at getting back, but it's because I'm prioritizing like what's right in front of me. He wasn't that good at it. So for years I've kind of been like, right, and it creates tension. Yeah. It creates tension in your own house when you have kind of two different points of view. And so the more he's learned through this work, I've seen a change. And the biggest change I've seen in the past 2 weeks was, we're doing a book club with the Balance Project. The book is called How to Break Up with Your Phone. And it's not really about breaking up with your phone completely. It's just about creating a healthier balance with real life and your phone. And I said, Rye, would you read the book? And he's not like a book reader. And he was like, okay. So he read the book, and he came home. He finished it before I did. He's training for a triathlon, so he actually listened to it on the bike forever.
Oh, smart.
And he came home, and he was like just spewing information and spewing like all of these insights that he had. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm so excited. Like, this is wonderful. And then layered on top of that, there's a tool called the RO Box that I have like seen and have been obsessed with for like a year. And through this process, we had them present at the device fair last week. So we got one in our house. And it's a physical box that you can put your phone in, and there's a companion app that tracks how much time away you are from your phone. So if you're someone who like appreciates an Apple Watch, or the rewards of closing your rings, which is my husband, you would appreciate this. But I knew like a year ago, I was like, we need to get this RO Box. It's going to help you. And he was like, we don't need that, blah, blah, blah. Sure, we get the box. He reads the book. We get the box. He's like a changed person, I swear to God, in 2 weeks.
Wow.
He has completely changed his habits. It tells you, you've reclaimed like 39 hours. He's reclaimed in the past, not even week.
Okay.
By putting his phone in the box, being in the present. Like, we both went to get ice cream without our phones. We both like,
I feel like it's like a vacation.
Kids. Yes.
Well, for me, I especially lately, you have to get back into the zone of because my phone is mostly just work. It's like 98% work. Yes. Even like my personal Instagram has now become work.
Yes.
And it's fine. And I'm very grateful for it, and we're doing like a lot of good work where I can bring, attention to organizations like yours. But at the same time, like when like you said, like if you can just go get ice cream and like not have your phone, I feel like I'm like jailbreaked or something.
Yes. No, it's yes. Well, I've seen like these crazy like memes that are like the internet used to be a break from life, and now life is a break from the internet.
Totally. I'm a runner. I love to run.
Yes.
It's the only physical activity I do. I hate the gym. I don't like classes. My friends are always like, come to this class. I'm like, maybe never happening. But I do that, and everyone thinks that I'm crazy that I don't listen to music while I run.
Oh, I love that.
And then recently, like I also like to read, but I don't have enough time to read, and so I'll get through a book maybe like once every couple months.
Yes.
So I have a list this high on my bedside, and they're like, oh, why don't you just start getting ebooks and put them on your run? And I won't, because it's the only time of day where I'm just with my thoughts.
Yes.
And if I'd actually be afraid to add that layer of like just that, like infiltrating that part.
Yeah.
Because then I don't get the time to like, like they say when like I talked about this a couple podcasts ago, like I took the week between Christmas and New Year's off, and I never do that. And like I came back clear, new ideas. Like you
really do.
It's
not just like made up. It's true.
Right. Yeah. So it's so important. So tell me, we are going to be the Balance Project and Monmouth Moms are going to be partnering in a couple of different initiatives this year to help fuel this, incredible organization that is quickly growing.
Yes.
And you've done so much with it so far. To bring some ideas to life, even locally, for parents. So we talked about maybe different age groups of, ideas of what to do with your kids, because it's tough. It's easier when they're little and they're like jumping, bouncing off the walls. You're like, all right, just go watch something on your iPad or whatever. But what are some things that that kids can do instead, and what are like the experts saying about that?
So I think the biggest thing is don't over orchestrate. I think it's very much about encouraging your kids to be bored, and if they tell you you're bored, one of the things we're working on is some language which we'll share in a blog post with you, is what to say to them when they come up to you and say you're bored. And one example is, that's great. It's your job as a kid to be bored. You have to go figure out how to be unbored. And that is what I'm saying when I say it's an experience blocker. If you just give them a screen or you pacify them with a screen, they don't have to be bored and they don't have to figure out how to be unbored. And so I think it really comes down to just you having that discipline too as a parent. And I think at first your kid's going to be uncomfortable with it, right? And they're going to be like, what? Are you kidding me? And you just have to hold your ground. And I've done this with my own kids, and, go figure it out. And so I think that's a very simple but also very hard thing to do. So I think it's a mix of tolerating that and kind of also that builds their frustration tolerance, it builds their creativity, it builds their independence, and then they feel proud when they figure out something to do, right? And when they're bored, that's when people pick up a guitar or they learn the piano or they start to paint, and they could be there could be undiscovered passions in your kid that they're not even getting the chance to explore because they're never forced to be bored. So I would say that's like one really easy one, and that applies across all ages. I think the other is, genuinely supporting that outdoor time. I think the outdoor time is so important, and getting out there with your kids too, right? So again, maybe you're tired and you wish you could just sit on the couch, and I get it, trust me. But it's also just, this is the only time we have with our kids this young, right? So I try to just remind myself of those videos that I watch, and it's like, imagine you're 90 and you look back to this moment, and what would you give when you're 90 to get back into this moment? And so even if I'm tired or I don't feel like doing something, I just try and give myself that perspective and get out there, and I end up always being grateful for that, right? So I think it's showing them, participating, letting them be bored, and then modeling great behavior. So again, we are all addicted ourselves, myself included, and that's why we're taking steps to do things in our home that, model what good looks like for our kids. And so again, it's hard. It's hard to do that, but I do encourage it. And then I think on the flip side, we're working on giving you all tips and tricks and tools to help replace the screen. So I mentioned to you, we created what we're calling our Balance Box to Go, which is for kids like 2 to 8. And it's essentially a little takeout box. I have it. Grab it. It's a little takeout box of little activities that kids can use at a restaurant, right? And so instead of giving them a screen, we have a little notebook. We have this little fun car tape with little cars that they can drive on. We have little pens, an invisible ink pen.
So great.
Wiki sticks. Who doesn't love wiki sticks? So for the younger kids, this is an easy way that you can replace the screen at dinner or at a restaurant or at an older sibling's soccer game or on a plane, on a train, on a bus.
Right.
And we're working on other stuff too that can help parents kind of replace that screen with other things. So I would just say keep it simple.
And you can buy that on
you can buy that on our website.
Then some local restaurants have it too.
Yes.
I think that's such a good idea. I was telling you about the one story when I think I posted a meme on Mom with Moms like over the holidays, and it was like, Simon Holland, like, I don't even know who Simon Holland is, but he always posts funny things like the dad. And and he was like, no one has more hopes than like a family bringing their like toddler to dinner.
True. Yep.
But like we just kept doing it, like thinking that like this time would be different. I think that's actually what it said. And it's very true.
Yes.
But like the one time that we were in Georgia with my daughter, I was telling right before the podcast about, she was like 1.5, and it was such a good meal, and we were on vacation. We were just like trying to get through it, and she was just not having it. I don't think she probably didn't nap that day or whatever. And we took a picture, and I showed it to my mom like from the trip afterwards, and she's like, "Oh, where's Grace in this picture?" Because it's like the older kids, and I was like, "Oh, she was under the table screaming."
Yep, been there.
Because it is such a nightmare. Like when you have you quickly forget because you have a 7-year-old, so like that like it does eventually stop.
Yes.
But like when you're in it, those like years of like basically 6 months to like 5-ish, where it's just like, why you might as well just go light $200 on fire.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
But I remember like those wiki sticks and a few restaurants that like would give out like little things to distract them, because you get those looks like in the restaurant when you have the kids on the iPad or whatever the whole time. I'm like, whatever, just like let me get through this meal.
Yes. Oh, totally. And like you don't, you want to live your life and go out and have fun, and you also want your kids to be a part of that, and they're just sometimes not capable. So
right.
It's hard.
Right. It's life.
So So I think, there's no perfect solution. I think what I tell people is I think just the general awareness is a huge step in the right direction. Like just being aware of this topic and, noticing, right? Like noticing your own experiences, noticing your own habits, noticing your kids' habits, and then over time, like again, you don't have to do this tomorrow, right? It can happen over time.
Yeah.
Just being aware and making little tweaks and by applying that level of mindfulness to technology and screen time and life in general is a really critical and important first step. Yeah.
This community really that you're building is really important for so many reasons, but I think too having like a resource of for parents to go to when there are tough conversations to be had, and one of which reminds me of not something personal, but I think maybe just something I saw on Instagram about how a father was handling a situation where their child did not have a phone, and they were going over to the friend's house who did have a phone, and they asked the parent like if that their child could not have a phone while their kid was over, and like you see both sides. It's kind of like well, my kid has a phone and don't tell me what to do. Yes. And the other one says like, well, I don't want my kid I don't know what your child has access to on their phones, and that is going to come up a lot. Yes. And like how to navigate those situations. Yes. And like you said, there's no one size fits all, and there's a lot of different gray area. Yes. When it comes to the digital age, right? Yes. Like with kids, and so I'd hope that there's probably a lot of people within your community who are going through this and have a lot to add.
Yes, huge conversation, and I think really the focus, and we kind of say 75% of our efforts are out of school in our community with our parents, right? Because that's where all the decisions and that's where the child development takes place. So we have our in-school team kind of focusing on in-school policies, but even our schools tell us the stuff that from out of home trickles into school. So they're like, please help us with the out of school part.
Totally, yeah.
And so I think what we're hoping to do there is again shift some of those norms and also take the pressure off of each individual parent and each individual family and each individual kid. So when you poll kids, they are actually saying that they wish they didn't have this. When you poll some of the Gen Z and they're saying, I'm not going to give social media to my kids. So, but it kind of just happened, right? And it's nobody's fault. When you think about it, the internet became widely available in 1991, which widely at that time was 1 million people. At the end of 2024, which was, about 35 years later, there was almost 6 billion people on a smartphone, right? So when you think about how seismic of a shift that is in such a short amount of time. It happened to us, right? And we just didn't know. And now we know, we're beginning to know what the implications are. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, and I joke, like, as an elder millennial, I'm like the last group of parents that had a pre-internet early childhood experience.
Same, me too. Yeah.
And so I feel an immense amount of responsibility to preserve the parts of that were so critical to my own personal development.
Yeah.
Because the parents that are even 5 years younger than me won't be able to do that.
Right.
And so that's where I'm like, we have to do this now. We have to do it collectively, and we have to recognize that, unfortunately, like, doing it in your home is not enough because the pressures are too wide and too vast. And to your point, they go to a friend's house, it's there, right?
Yeah.
So how do we make it the norm that it's not everywhere, right? And that there's at least a group of people who are on the same page, and hopefully over time it becomes more normalized to delay these things,
right,
and give our kids a chance to be kids before we give them the whole world in their pocket.
Totally. And the other piece too is just awareness of what is out there and what can, happen.
Yes.
and what to be, if your child already does have a phone, and, that's your decision. My son was the first generation of kids that got smartphones.
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yes.
Like you said, this happened to us. So
Yes.
when I think he was 12 when he got a smartphone. He's going to be 21. So, in a few weeks. And, that was eye-opening because
Yes.
there was, there's apps on there, like all kinds of stuff that, like Snapchat actually was one of the first
Yes.
social media platforms that came out, like in his generation. So like
Yeah.
all the disappearing things
Yes.
and this, and, like it was very eye-opening,
Yes.
what the kids like were doing. And I was like, wait, what? Like there's
Yes.
there's vault apps, there's like all kinds of crazy stuff out there. So you really like, and I've said a few times that, he was my first child.
Yes.
So like you don't know what you don't know.
No, totally.
And you I think too with parents, like for their first kid getting any type of device and any social media and stuff like that, like you really need to know like what's out there, what can happen.
Yes.
And and then the schools unfortunately are getting, wrapped up in a lot of what the kids are doing,
Yeah.
right? And having to get police involved and
Yeah.
having to get like investigations involved and
Yep.
phones taken away and stuff like that.
Yep.
So have the schools, kind of talked about that a little bit within?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's a huge topic. And
Okay.
actually, I spoke to someone that was at our event last week that I think would be perfect for the event that we are envisioning
Okay.
to do together. So I
Yeah.
have to tell you about that. But yes, the schools are kind of just distraught, really,
Okay.
over this whole thing, because I think they, again, it happened to them too. And the whole technology burst onto the scene.
Yeah.
And, everyone was like, okay, we don't want to lag, right? We have to adopt this technology. We're so excited the kids have cell phones. They said that kind of it started in that very positive place because it felt like so much potential for, new ways of learning. And I think now, again, that we're 20 years in or however many years it is, it's that sense of the pendulum, right? The pendulum swang really, really tech focused.
Yep.
And now we're trying to get it back somewhere into the middle. And I think, administrators in schools are very aware and have many of those educational discussions with parents about what can happen and what's at risk for your kids.
Are most of the bullying incidents because of like technology?
I think, there's always going to be bullying, right? I
Yeah.
think that's just a normal part of childhood. I think what makes it worse is that it's, it used to be you would be bullied and then it would go away, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't go away now.
Right.
It's forever. We've heard stories of kids like being nervous about being recorded, if they're like picking their nose or something. And like, it's just like the littlest things that we probably would never even think of.
Yeah.
They're like always on alert and they're always like, is someone recording this? Is this going to end up somewhere? I have to be mindful about what I say. And so it's fully infiltrated their lives that they don't know life without it. So I don't think they also know how to articulate what good does look like, because many of those kids now, that's been their entire experience.
Interesting.
So I don't know if it's only because of it. I think it's just exponentially worse. And, we joked at our first meeting, like, imagine your awkward, middle school photos were just, like, blasted on the internet for all to see at all times, right? I was happy to put those in a box and hide them under my bed and never bring them out again. But these kids don't have that chance. Like, their every move could be used against them.
Right.
And their every decision could be used against them. And that's a lot of pressure.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me you mentioned a few schools have gotten involved.
Yes.
Can you speak to, which districts and how it's growing?
Yeah. So we're really excited. We've gotten so much interest, and we kicked off 9 communities last week. So we have Little Silver, Fairhaven, Rumson, Oceanport, Brick, Brielle, Shrewsbury, Homedale.
I think that might have been 9.
Was it?
I don't know.
I can't remember. If I'm missing someone, I'm really sorry. I still love you. And so those are kind of officially off and running. And then we've got probably 20 more in the queue that are interested and that are kind of organizing themselves.
Well, because they're probably so inundated, like I said, they have to handle a lot of different situations with all kinds of different things happening with the phone. So I think they'd welcome, support from an organization that is like really aimed to facilitate change.
Yep.
So how are you working with them, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So we're parent led. So it's very much, we want the hand raisers that are interested in starting a community where they are. And we frame it as a community intentionally because we do see this as an all hands on deck effort between the parents, the schools, and even local businesses and local establishments and the town council. So those are all the communities that are on board, and the kind of we lay out a process, and again, it kind of follows a behavioral change process. So how are we inviting people into the conversation, kind of sharing what we're doing? How are we exciting them about the mission and what's possible and what good looks like? How are we uniting people around shared beliefs and shared areas of focus? And then how are we activating, and how are we actually going into the community and pulling this through? So what we do is we have parents reach out or sign up to say that they're interested, and then we kind of go through, we kind of train them, if you will, on the approach. And then we give them suggested text messages to reach out to friends that are casual. That's just like testing the waters, right? We give them an email to send to their administration. We give them a deck to take to their administration. We give them talking points. If they want, we'll go with them. And then, we give them suggestions for, how to start the conversation. And then we have tools and templates that we are providing to say, okay, if you want to look and evaluate your school's policies, here's a template and here's how to go about it. And we are creating what's called a balance pact outside of school to say, okay, if we're delaying phones and we're, we want our kids to be more independent, we want them to get outside and, take on more responsibility, how are we encouraging that? So we have all of this stuff kind of templatized, if you will, that we can just hand off to parents. And so one of the first things we do is we say, don't, go with a pitchfork or whatever and run to your administration and say, you guys are doing everything wrong. Like, that is not the approach. The approach is very much, hey, we're here. This is a problem. It's a problem. We know it's a problem. You're trying to address it. We're trying to address it. We need to do this together.
Gotcha.
And so that's really the intention, is like creating that shared consensus building approach. And then we're also engaging like our town council, right? Because if we want our kids to ride their bikes to school, or we want them to play on the playgrounds, maybe we need to get better sidewalks, or maybe we need better playgrounds, or maybe we need more green space. So again, it's not a one-dimensional issue.
Sure.
Because you can't take something away and not replace it.
It's two questions. Have the school districts been, because I don't know this yet. I know they really weren't doing it with my son, and he's, like already way out of high school. And with my daughter, she's not at the age yet where I think they probably would have given any type of like assembly. But do they do any type of like educational type of assembly for the kids, and or do they bring anyone into the classrooms from the township, or is it district based, or
it's so I think New Jersey has a digital citizenship requirement. So there's like a basic digital foundation that's required in New Jersey. Then some schools I've seen have specific educational programs that they've brought in to educate at different ages and stages, what's appropriate. So like for younger kids, it would be, just kind of laying out the general framework of, what is the internet and what does it mean, and what could happen. And then as they get older, it gets more specifically into some of the risks and harms and even the neuroscience of developing brain and how that has, the phones and the internet have an impact on that. So I've seen that, and that's something that as a part of our recommendation, we are recommending that schools add that on if they don't have it yet. And then in addition, we are, working through what does that full implementation look like in the schools. So our goal is by September to have kind of a full plan for the next school year.
Gotcha.
And so that's really our goal. In Little Silver, in Oceanport, Fairhaven, and Rumson, I think we all have that September goal. I think some of the other towns that came on a little bit later might have to extend that out just to get everything done. But the hope is that we're going to go into that next school year with kind of a new mindset, with a new alignment on what our school policies should be and a rolling implementation of those, because they can't all happen overnight. A new expectation in our community, people able to sign that balance pact, and then just that full activation where you can imagine, no phone zone signs and, park beautification or things like that. So we're kind of using Little Silver as the testing ground, and then rolling it out along the way to everybody else.
That's great.
Yeah.
You're doing such incredible work, and really so like in awe that it's grown so quickly. Which clearly is a huge need, and I think that there's a lot of parents that just they don't want to. They also see that as a problem, and it's really just kind of like, how do we integrate like this new digital age for our kids, for ourselves, but also, not go down a deep dark path and be doom scrolling, because I'm guilty of it too.
100%. And like I am not here to say like I have it all right at all.
Right.
But I think just the awareness goes a long way.
Totally.
It really does.
Yeah. And I think too, like a lot, like what you said about how you feel like you get a little break, or like you feel like a little like excited to not have your phone.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yes.
And I think it's always like, for me especially, like it's tied to work.
Yes.
So it's like I feel guilty if I'm not on my phone.
Yes.
Because you're like, you're not a good employee if you're not connected to your email.
Yes.
Even before I ran Mama's Moms,
Yes.
it was it was kind of like that, where if I wasn't like just constantly like looking for to reply to my boss or whatever.
Yes.
Boundaries really, is essential. So I think that there's so much important work that needs to be done, and it seems like you're the perfect person to be
you're so sweet.
trailblazing
Thank
this. So anything that we can do to help, and like I said, we're going to be working on some initiatives together to just spread the word and really help, right? Like to kind of share what you know and what you have learned and what your organization is continuing to learn about so many different things that are happening, because it's not, like you said, it's not one size fits all, and it's not just not just for middle schoolers and high schoolers. It's really there's a lot.
One of my big aha moments personally was I thought I was ahead of the game by doing this with my oldest being 7, and I kind of wish I knew what I know now when my kids were even littler, because you really do set the tone for what their life looks like in those early years. So that's, I think, an interesting area that we are going to get more into, because there's not a lot there yet for those younger kids. It's really focused on the olders. But I'm like thinking about new moms and expecting moms, and like you really have to think about this.
Have
like,
a plan.
Yeah, like have a plan. Like, what are you going to do? With sleep training, what are you going to do for this? So that's a whole other area that it's on my list. But you know how lists go. Yes. They're very long.
Yes. Well, I think you've created a great foundation. So
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll get there.
Thank you.
Okay. I know you just had an event last Thursday.
Yes.
Right? Thursday?
Yes.
For now, where can everyone find you? I know that you have some events that you'd like to get in the works, but nothing on the calendar right now.
We have one more event on the calendar,
Okay.
yes. So first, we have a website. So it's thebalanceproject.life, not .com. So you can check us out there. Please sign up for our email list. You can follow us on Instagram. It's thebalanceproject_HQ, as in headquarters. So cool. We have an event coming up that's a really exciting event on May 3rd. It is a Saturday. It's a family event. We're still working out the location, so if anyone has ideas, please let me know. I have one idea or one place on hold, but I'm trying to get something a little closer. And that is, we're going to have Lenore Skenazy from Let Grow come and speak to us and actually do a community workshop. So Lenore is part of Let Grow, which is Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, his book. He and Lenore co-founded Let Grow, which is all about the childhood independence, play, and responsibility. And so their whole mission is making it normal for kids to be outside and do activities. And they've got programs for schools, and they've got programs for out of school. And they work on legislation to make it, get the laws adjusted so that the kids don't have to be like 15 before they can walk to the store by themselves, things like that. So she speaks a lot about the importance of independence as a building block for kids. And we're going to bring her in to do her keynote speech. She's amazing. She's written books. She's on all of the national media news. So it's like a huge opportunity for our community to hear from her. And then they've agreed, we're actually partnering with them, that press release will go out soon, to build a community toolkit. So essentially, how can people activate in their communities, and essentially, focus on that independence and play and responsibility. And we're going to be doing a workshop together, kind of building out what good looks like for communities. And that's going to be taken really to a national level. So it's a huge opportunity. If you're in the area, you can sign up. You can pre-register for that. Your kids can come. We're going to have kid-friendly activities. And
that's great, too, because then they'll see,
age-appropriate education. We're pulling all of that in.
It's something that is for, the greater good for them. And start planting that seed, right?
Yes.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have our book club, which the wonderful Katie McNolly, she's a principal and a book lover, and she's leading our book club. So we have 6 books that we're reading over the course of a year. The first one is The How to Break Up with Your Phone. You can come in person to my living room, or you can join virtually. And we're going to, start with that book and then move on to other topics in the area. And then there probably will be more that pop up, because there's other towns getting involved now, and there's just a lot of interest. So it's really, we want it, all are welcome. You don't have to live in Little Silver to participate. We want everyone to kind of get this message and get involved. And you can also start a community of your own. We have an online community hub that allows you to very easily invite people and collect emails and create events and do all of that. So we're trying to serve it all to you on a silver platter. So you're welcome to join and be a part of the movement.
Yeah, we'll put your website and handle in the notes so everyone can access, and feel free to reach out with any questions. But we will continue to provide as much information about your organization as possible, and I'm sure it'll grow. There's 52 towns in Monmouth County, 52 towns in boroughs technically, but there's much a lot more work to be done. So I'm sure there's many moms that'll want to start getting involved.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
You're incredible, and I can't wait to watch you grow.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And we're all so excited to have this platform to share more about us. So we just really appreciate you welcoming us on.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.